It is 11:01. We will officially call today's Workforce and Talent Development Board Continuous Improvement Committee meeting to order. We do have quorum, so we'll go ahead and check and see if there is any public comment.
There is none from my end.
Great. Next on the agenda is to go ahead and approve the minutes from January, February, and June 2025 committee meetings. Is there a motion from the floor?
So moved.
I'll second.
Let's see. I see Anne with the motion. Anne, it's so good to see you, and Chris with the second. Is there any discussion? All right. All those in favor, please signal or say by saying hi, aye, or raising your hand. Aye.
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 Excellent. Are there any opposed? Anyone wishing to abstain? All right, motion passes. I'm going to hand it over to Ashley and Todd to give us an update on everything that's going on.
Todd, I'll let you lead and then I'll be here as support.
Okay, great. Hey, welcome back. It's been quite a time since we all convened for a committee meeting. So I hope Thanksgiving was enjoyable and you got to spend some time with your loved ones and family. Yeah, I think sort of as I was prepping for the meeting and thinking back and reflecting on what's happened over the last 6 months approximately, there haven't been very many meetings. And most of that is because we promised all you committee members that we weren't going to meet just for meeting's sake. That said, there were several meetings of the four of us, the four being Ashley, myself, Chris, and Kaylin. And oh, by the way, as a reminder, prior to Ashley joining us, we did have Heather Ficht for a small while, but other competing priorities, and she's the executive director of East Cascades Workforce Boards, but competing priorities pulled her away. And so she and Ashley agreed that Ashley, who is the executive director of Lane Workforce Partnership, come in and fill that slot as co-staff to the Continuous Improvement Committee of the WTDB with me. And before that, you all remember it was Andrew McGough with Work Systems. And some of you, if not all of you, probably heard. I'm trying to actually think of everything and anything that, you know, folks might not either recall or weren't here to know. Andrew McGough a while back announced his retirement for June of 26. So he's heavily involved in, obviously, with succession planning and all that work. Also, I think, Ashley, I don't think we've talked about for quite some time sort of why it shifted from Andrew, in part also to other board directors. But the thinking behind all that was that we really needed to have representation from other local workforce boards of the 9 that are out there across the 36 counties. Particularly, Kaylin, I'm channeling you right now. So particularly from rural and frontier Oregon. And so I think that's why we shifted initially to Heather Ficht and Ashley with Lane County. I think you pick up sort of that mid-metro as well as a lot of rural as well. Mm-hmm. So I'm really glad that you're here, Ashley. So back to those meetings that we did have as co-chairs, mainly over the summer and into the fall. We really focused on, I think it was Kaylin's good idea, on trying to work with Representative Pham, who is on the Workforce and Talent Development Board. And he voiced and connected with us his desire to try to figure out a way to bring together partners to help inform legislative session. And so we tried our darndest to bring together several state legislators as well as federal legislators. We tried, I think, to try to do that the end of August and then in September, but we just could not get enough traction to be able to do that. That's not to say that we didn't have a lot of interest. There was a lot of interest, but just not enough time to pull it together given the session and other extenuating circumstances, i.e. vacation, summers, all that. But I think there was a fair amount of interest, and there still is, I think, a lot of energy around trying to do something with a group of state legislators as well as potentially federal legislators, not that they may be able to attend in person. So it might be a virtual thing to come together during the Talent Summit. The Talent Summit in 2026 is, if you don't have it on your calendars, please get it on there. It's on May 19th at the Salem Convention Center. And so I think the goals would be similar in terms of coming together and better understanding at a state and local and regional level, workforce and economic issues and opportunities, challenges, and then sort of a collective collaborative conversation about what could potentially be priorities to provide to the HEC, to the agency enterprise, to legislators, to the governor's office in terms of workforce and talent development strategies and concepts. So I can't, there was one other thing I had on my list here, Ashley. We are down a few members as we chatted, I think, way back in probably mid to early summer. We had Debbie Rady, who received a promotion and had to roll off because of the increased duties over at Boardman Foods, that was on this committee representing business in that sector. And then we also had Wendy Popkin, who represented initially hospitality, and then shifted roles to Washington County. I can't remember exactly where she was, but she was still involved in engagement with business. She too took another role and rolled off. So I just bring that up to remind everybody that we do have, in terms of business, two folks that we need to get. As I met with Leah this morning prior to this meeting for our one-on-one, we talked about reaching out to two new board members that have recently been appointed by the governor and seeing if those two business people would at all be interested in filling those seats. And then I think we have a couple of other ones that we need to sort out. Robert Westerman, who represented labor. And then I think Paul Brown has made a shift. I don't know if Paul, are you here today? No. I guess another announcement, Paul Brown, who used to be the owner of and I think CEO and president of his organization, which was a tech staffing firm, of which the name escapes me right now. I found out maybe about a month ago that he since transitioned from that and now works at Work Systems. So I don't know sort of what he and Andrew have in mind for that. Technically, he couldn't fill what he filled previously, which was a business seat. But maybe there's an opportunity for him to still participate. Not quite sure, Ashley. You and I ought to likely get together here in the next week or so and sort of discuss that and figure that out. But I think other than, the next agenda item of going over the statement of work, that's all I had to offer up. I don't know if Ashley, you wanted to jump in and say a few words, and then also maybe Caitlin, you and Chris as well.
Sure. So for those that I don't know, Ashley Espinoza, I'm the executive director of Lean Workforce Partnership. So Eugene, Springfield, and surrounding areas. We have the Cascades to the coast over here. I'm really excited to be on the KIT committee. I mean, we've heard about it at OWP meetings with the other directors and really trying to understand how to support the work of the KIC, and then also with the work that we're doing on the ground. Just so that you all know, our local board was approved to be the one-stop operator for our board, which really looks at how all of these programs work together at a local level, but really it can shine a light on what could potentially happen at a state level. So we have that insight. And Ryan Kanowski, he is on my team. He's here on the call with me because he helped with putting this statement of work together to really reflect where this work has gone, what has been accomplished until now, and then really what will take us into this next iteration that we're hoping the public workforce system looks like, with what's happening at Oregon Employment Department, what's happening with a lot, just with all of the shifts and the modernization and just the accountability that people are wanting to see. I think we're in a perfect time, and Ryan, I feel, did a really great job with team to set it up that way. So I'm excited to see what you guys think. And I'm really glad to be the representative from Oregon Workforce Partnership. And I can't wait to see what comes from all of this. So thank you.
Thanks, Ryan, and thanks, Ashley, so much for just jumping on. I think everyone, we really lucked out with Ashley saying yes to serving in this role, in this capacity. She's a fighter. She takes ideas and runs with them, and so I'm just really excited to see where things move from here. Any discussion or questions for Todd and Ashley, kind of on any updates or where we are at with the KIC, or is everyone ready to just move forward with the agenda?
Kaylin, I would just like to add that I really appreciate Ashley's willingness to take on this role as well. She's a breath of fresh air. After a lot of frustrating conversations in the last 6 weeks, I feel like we've actually gotten some traction, gotten some momentum and some new ideas. And so super excited to roll out what we've been talking about and to get everybody's input on that.
Excellent. So let's roll right into the 2026 WorkSource Oregon assessment. And Ashley and Todd, I'm not sure which one of you guys is going to take the lead on that.
Actually, I can jump in and start, and then I'll pause every maybe 2 pages of the statement of work. Or okay, great. I'll do that, and then if you want to just jump in, just interrupt me, and that's totally fine.
And I will say Ryan is here for a reason. Like, if there are specific questions of like, why is it written this way? I wanted it to come from him directly, because this is a collaborative space. And so I wanted to be able to have him here to be able to hear from all of you. So know that if you have specific questions, Ryan is on deck as well.
Yeah, thanks so much for bringing Ryan along. And in my opening statement here, I wanted to acknowledge him, as well as Kaylin, Chris, and you, Ashley. I would say between those, the 4 of us, Ryan, and I'll add Julia Pontoni, who also reviewed this statement of work, as key contributors to where we are at this juncture and with what we want to share with you. That said, I also shared out the draft statement of work with the folks on the workforce system executive team, which comprised mid-management leaders across the key titles within the Workforce and Innovation and Opportunity Act, or WorkSource Oregon in the public workforce system. I've gotten one comment back, but full transparency, I didn't get those out till right before the break for Thanksgiving. So I anticipate that we may hear some additional comments back from those folks. So we wanted today to bring you all together and just go through with y'all where we currently landed on the draft statement of work for the 2026 WorkSource Oregon assessment. And we'd love to get any input, feedback, recommendations that you may have. I think you'll see as we work through this that it looks, similar to what we've done in the past for our even year legislative requirement or required WorkSource Oregon assessment. So here on the first page, it's basically pulled right from Senate Bill 623, which highlights the requirement of this WorkSource Oregon assessment on the even years. It also highlights the key partners that will be part of this assessment. HEC will be assessed, local workforce development boards will be assessed, as well as the Employment Department, Commission for the Blind, Department of Human Services, Self-Sufficiency, and Oregon and Community Services Department, and other entities as deemed appropriate by the committee. I'll pause there for a second and then also say, as many of, if not most, well, almost all of you probably remember, sort of the process that we followed the last time and the time before, were to convene a small group, a sort of subcommittee or advisory committee that once the RFP was released, submissions were received and then scored, that advisory committee would participate in that scoring and awarding process and then bring it back to the full committee. We tried to do it with the full committee, but it was a little bit difficult given the schedules and competing priorities that people have. So just wanted to flag that. I don't know how we want to handle that, Ashley, Chris, and Kaylin. I think the last time we did that, we just asked for volunteers. And then we combined, I think maybe a co-chair or two participated, a handful of folks from this committee participated, and then the rest of that was filled out with staff. So there's the partners. If you could scroll down, Aaliyah, that would be great. This talks about what the assessment will entail. It's very similar, but a bit different than the last one. I think it really sort of leans into the improvement process. And one of the things that Chris and Kaylin and I and Heather and both Ashley really sort of raised up during our conversations about how the statement of work would look compared to previous statement of work documents was that we really wanted to make sure, and hats off to Chris Latimer, because I think this was her sort of big idea, was that we really needed to get out into the communities across the state and have conversations with people at the local and regional level, conversations with business folks, conversations with job seekers, other employers, as well as, the usual suspects within this public workforce system and then some. So I think that's one key thing that is different this go around. If you look at the next paragraph per 6 above, it calls out the different documents that the contractor will be required to review. Kaylin had a great idea of trying to sort of turn this into a higher level review, but per the legislation, we had to really sort of call out some of these individual documents. And if you could scroll down, Aaliyah, so folks could see those, that would be great. So in addition to the initial assessment and other assessments that we've done thus far to review to better understand what's happening, you can see the list here of the WorkSource Oregon system definition that the KIC worked on and was approved. Also, there's been some great work that's happened per the governor's letter that you all ought to be proud of, I think, in part influencing that to happen, if not largely. that we received back in May of this year that really called out leadership from the WTDB to require regular reporting of data on performance measures to the WTDB. Several performance measures were recommended to WTDB, and I think were approved to go to the governor's office, where I think it's still sort of under review. I think they'll come back when Julia Pontoni presents at the December 12th WTB full board meeting on that work for the board to hear the latest and greatest in terms of what's happening across the agency enterprise on that, as well as some other information. But that sort of review of all those things, once the contractor is hired, will be required of them to review, of course, the strategic plan and scorecard, and let's see. Oh, and again, any additional documents that the KIC or I suppose the contractor deems necessary. So there's sort of three chunks here that you'll see as far as deliverables go. The first one is called out here, which is a combination of the kickoff meeting and a project plan that is required by the WTDB, on the part of the contractor. So I'll stop there and Ashley, see if there's anything you want to add, and then also if there are any questions.
I guess the only thing I'll add is like that list of partners. I'm not sure if people are aware that that's the meat and potatoes of the public workforce system. And so one of the documents, and I'll drop the link in the chat, is the definition of the public workforce system. And that's important because workforce boards are in law the oversight of that, right? So, but we don't have necessarily any authority over these partners. And so it really does matter what the action plan is and how we move forward as partners, knowing that there's complexity within that. And that's also why we called out any other partner, because we know community colleges and all these other partners are super important, but we wanted to focus really on those 13 core programs. And then I really love underneath, I think, I guess right there where it is, the review should identify where a reassessment is and is not needed. So another thing that we're really trying to do is that we're not trying to develop another assessment just to check that box, but really understand, okay, where have we been, where are we now, and then how do we mobilize people on the ground that are doing the work on the front lines. So that's what I would say about this piece. I don't know, Ryan, do you want to add anything? Okay.
Great. Thanks so much. And apologies if you can't, I forgot to mention this above or in my previous comments, but apologies if the link is broken to the agenda. I just tried it again to see what was upcoming, and it's still not working. So apologies. Hopefully we can get that working again. It's some sort of tech glitch, but thanks for your patience on that. Okay, so moving on to, if you could, Ashley or Aaliyah, move on to the task 2 there. And so, as I mentioned earlier, one of the things we really wanted to do was capture information at the local level area, not just necessarily from, like we've done in the past, right? But from and at. So really be engaged at the local level across the 36 counties, and really leverage the convening role that the local workforce boards play. And in addition to that, bring in as many regional and local partners that have an interest in this WorkSource Oregon system as possible. So you can see here, it's about conducting information gathering and then analysis. We haven't really called out return on investment and program impact analysis. So that's kind of exciting for me as a staff person to have that focused on. I think that's going to be a little bit challenging and require a fair amount of staff assistance, both at the local and state level, but I'm pretty confident that we'll be able to figure that out. So it talks about in the task 2A, sort of what that outreach looks like. Again, there's a strong desire to make sure that's people to people, person to person, in a human sort of approach that, you know, we all know has waned considerably since the onset of COVID. So we're really trying to get back out there and have, you know, networking occur, human-to-human conversations, and build relationships to really better understand what's happening on the ground across the state. Can you go to the next page, please, Aaliyah? And then we can move into, oops, can you go back right there? Thank you. This is kind of your, you know, typical SWOT sort of information gathering approach in terms of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. We call out what that looks like here. And again, hats off, Ryan, at Lane Workforce Partnership for your good thinking here. I think it really added to the substantive language we have here. I did have one question here that we are still working on in that first sentence. Interview leaders, participants, current and previous customers, potential customers, and others. That's pretty comprehensive. To gather qualitative and quantitative input from a cost-benefit program impact, including promising and best or struggling practices. Analysis from a variety of different workforce system integration and alignment efforts, and to identify effective or maybe required, we toss that language in, implementation practices and system conditions that lead to measurable improvement. So thoughts on that? You know, if you're interested in providing comments, that'd be great. It also talks in that next paragraph about the improvement recommendations that have been implemented as provided in the 2024 assessment. As you recall, we did this in the 2024 assessment based on the 2022 assessment, but it's really just sort of that opportunity to say, okay, based on what we recommended and asked of the system to do last time, what's really transpired, what's gone well, what hasn't, and what do we need to do about it? Could you scroll down, Aaliyah? Thank you. I really liked, I think this was Ryan's idea, that last paragraph there under 2B, contractor will develop and implement a completion matrix for each recommendation. So it's sort of that project plan concept, identifying stages, barriers encountered, lessons learned, and next opportunities to move things forward. I'll pause there. Any comments, any questions? Okay, hearing none, let's move on. Oh, Ashley, did you have oh, you just put something in the chat.
It took me a bit to find the definition link, but I found it.
Could you, yeah, thanks. Sorry, Aaliyah, could you scroll up just slightly to that last? Great, thanks. So the last part of task 2 here is more about that work on the ground. We're planning on having the contractor help us convene several events, I'd say, out in the local areas across the state, and they will help do that. And in addition to that, as we did the last go around, as many of you probably remember, be a part of bringing the information, their findings, their recommendations to design work sessions with you all to, better understand, chat about, discuss what they learned and what opportunities and potential solutions make sense based on all that information. So next slide, or next page, please. So under section 2, there are several deliverables that we've outlined for the contractor, including leading that engagement. And here it says 5 or more local areas or regions across the state. We were a little bit like ambivalent here because right, we only have a certain amount of budget, and the more of those convenings across the state that we have, the spendier it's going to get. So the second bullet, you can see lead, coordinate, and convene 9 partner hosted events at key partner locations, calling out, as Ashley said, sort of the core group of WorkSource Oregon partners. So I think we're still, at least at the staff level, I think we're still trying to figure out how we fit the 9 partner hosted events into the budget. But we obviously, I think we can find a solution. We're going to have to work with the procurement office at HEC to sort of think through the cost on this thing. I imagine that we'll discuss this in the kickoff meeting and sort of land on the plan. This may get changed a little bit, again, based on budget, but at a minimum, we'll touch on at least 5 of the 9 local areas, and then hopefully we'll be able to. It would make sense, right, if we connect with all of the 9 local areas, but we may be able to, as the 4 of us, Ashley, Kaylin, Chris, and I chatted about, we may be able to pull this off by sort of doing an overlap. For example, maybe, and I'm making this up, Ashley, I can't remember what I said the last time we talked, but maybe it's a situation where, Southern Oregon Workforce Investment Board combines with Rogue Workforce Partnerships, and so in this sort of the same geographic area, and maybe in a strategic space between the two, convene both those local board areas. Maybe it's Lane Workforce Partnership and East Cascades, or maybe it's East Cascades and Far East Workforce Board, Eastern Oregon Workforce Investment Board. Maybe it's Clackamas and Work Systems that pull together, right? So where it makes sense, we can maybe combine because budgets are tight. We recently had to go through a 5% budget reduction exercise across the entire agency. So just keeping that top of mind, but I'm sure we can figure out a solution. Yeah, Ashley, it looks like you had your hand up.
Yeah, and I guess I would say is I think through as the contractor goes through these assessments, I think 5 is good, and if we could do more, that's great. But really, the idea is on the industry and business engagement side, and on the talent seeker side, are people getting what they need, depending on their geographics, right, and their economic diversity? And so I think with 5 of the 9, we just have to be thoughtful that those considerations are being had, and that we're not spending time in similar areas and completely disregarding the frontier, which I don't think we will with Kaylin on deck here. But but I think that's the thing, is that with the 5, it will just give us an idea of that how are business and industry engaging, because this should be a public good for industry to engage and get their pipeline, their talent, and then how is talent getting and receiving services. So I really do believe that, as picking a really good contractor, and as they go through those kind of first assessments, we could get to 5 really good convenings and get all the information that we probably need. But always having a touch point in all 9 regions is always preferable, because there are regions that do feel left out. And so how do we not do that? So anyways, I think we can get what we need, but yeah, it's always ideal to go to all 9.
Yeah, good stuff. Thank you so much, Ashley. Kaylin, Chris, anything to add?
I think my goal and how I was wanting the whole team to approach it this year was how can we get in front of the people that are doing the work? Help them feel seen, help them feel valued and appreciated, not like they were being, reviewed with check boxes and it's going to come back with a negative scorecard, but that it really elevates the centers that are doing really good work, and it can offer, support and services to the ones that are saying, actually, we're struggling in this area. And so we're really wanting to also approach this with a very much a relationship focused intention of supporting the people that are doing the work.
Looks like Craig, you have your hand up.
You calling on me?
Yes, I am. How are you, Craig?
I'm good, thank you. I can just barely hear you, by the way.
Oh.
So I'm curious about the discussions in this list of deliverables, because I don't think I've ever seen this. Anything along the lines of what we've spent over the last 4 years, in workforce systems, and what have we delivered? What have the metrics been for improvement? So I challenge my own workforce board fairly regularly with how much money have we spent? How much money are we planning to spend? And how many people are we getting into the system to work, and not just in education or assistance? So I don't see that in any of this. And I agreed to join in this some time back so that I could see metrics, how much money we spend versus how much do we deliver. And I'm curious about what that conversation has looked like as we're trying to draft a new scope of work.
Craig, can you hear me better?
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Todd.
Can you
Sorry.
hear me, Craig? No, I don't know if you can. Craig, you're on mute.
Todd.
Yeah.
Todd, you're coming through fine on.
Okay.
To me,
Okay.
Essentially it's
too loud now.
Craig, and I'm just saying this as the new person on the team here. What's really hard about what you're asking for, and I think this is where there's been a disadvantage and where our focus has gotten lost a bit, is that none of these systems talk to one another. None of these systems work with one another really well. I mean, some regions more than the other. So I believe 623, the whole idea is like the acknowledgement that that's the case, and like trying to force it to happen through legislation. And so what has happened so far, I feel like there has been a lot done qualitatively within the system to support activation for people to get services moving forward. So for example, Oregon Workforce Partnership, we're working hard to have, committees across the boards of like staff to be able to support when something's going really well in one region, how do we implement and in the other region, or kind of the other, so a lot of like infrastructure is being done to support activation. But if you were to look at the cost and how many people are getting jobs, like if somebody goes today and they get a job tomorrow, I don't know how accurate. I mean, don't know what that would look like, but I do know that there's a lot of infrastructure, like there's been a lot of force stuff being done on our end operationally to support the vision of the kick, for whatever that's worth.
Yeah,
So-
thanks, Ash. Oh,
So
sorry, Craig.
Ashley, I would just follow up with that to say again, I know what this legislation said. I had an idea of what I thought what they were seeking was answers to: are we doing this right? Are we doing things wrong? how do we measure? That's what I understood about a continuous improvement committee. And, we had to get through the fog of all of that in 22, 23, but here we are moving into another assessment process, and we don't ask the question about investments. In my job, I have to look at how much money we're spending and what are we actually delivering. Because in my elected position, if I don't deliver the product for the amount of taxes I'm collecting, it's a big problem. I can't stay on my job. And so I keep asking these questions of any committee I serve on. If we're spending the taxpayers' money in these works and these processes, are we getting better? And that's what this committee was supposed to be from my assessment. So we got a lot of words in here about deliverables and about evaluations of work, but I haven't seen any place in there that talks about what are we investing, what are we getting out of it, and clearly the state of Oregon needs to really start focusing on that across a lot of different platforms. And one of the places that I hear folks constantly complaining about is the weakness of our education system across the board, and what we're delivering in education, and that does of course translate to how many people are actually ready for work. But all of this to me should be in the improvement committee's domain. And so are we improving, or are we just going through the motions? And that's what I'm worried about.
Mhm.
Yeah, Craig, very good points, obviously, and thanks again for bringing those up. I think ever since you become a part of this committee and the State Workforce Board, you've really tried to keep us laser focused on what the heck are we doing with the money, and is it getting us the outcomes that it needs to get. One of the things, I guess I have a few things just to add to what Ashley said to just maybe help answer that question. I think we still have a fair amount of ways to go on this work, but I'm going to share a document which was presented at the last WTDB meeting about the work that is happening with those sort of mid-management leaders that I talked about at the state level as a result of work that this committee did in the last assessment in terms of engagement from the governor. And you remember, we got that letter from the governor, or the board got that letter rather from the governor back in May of last year, directing the State Workforce Board to require the state agencies to pull together reporting and to bring that reporting on performance, outcomes, results, however you want to, frame that, to the WTDB to help them more lean into their role around accountability and continuous improvement, right? So this is, I won't show you everything else that Julia Pontoni presented at the WTDB meeting there at Amazon up in Portland in September, but this is part of it. And it includes already, as a local board member and somebody who's been involved in this space for many years, some of this you'll recognize, some of it you probably might not agree with, but several of them are federal performance measures. In addition to that, it was recommended that some others be added. So I'll call out a few of these here in just a second. But Craig, I also want to underscore a second thing, which is you probably remember in the 18 board metrics on our current 25-26 strategic plan, we have a call out to establish a metrics task force. One of the high level goals of that task force is to not only review and sort of continue to provide leadership around these performance measures that are called out on this document, but also to have conversations around what you just talked about. What other metrics, in addition to those that are either currently required by, the Department of Labor, or with slight tweaks to them, would we want to and could we require so that we can better gauge success and return on investment? So, I mean, from my standpoint, I think what you're saying is spot on. What can we do? And we're working on it. It's, as you know, it's slower than many of us want it to be, but I think that the governor's letter requiring and directing the state board to sort of really lean into this space is helping push things forward. So I don't know that I really need to go through all these. It'll take a bunch of time, and we only got about 14 minutes left. But Craig, you'll note that these here under employment, retention, earnings, skill and credential gains, they're currently required by the Department of Labor in terms of things like, hey, after 6 months, is the person that got the job still employed? How many people were enrolled? Those types of things, right? How many people are employed 1 year later after going through programs, being placed with an employer, getting a job, and still there after a year? Employed by the same employer. I think this is something that's a little bit different. I mean, we haven't really called it out, but I think it sort of gets at that retention piece, right? Okay, great if they're still employed, but how many employers did they have over that course of that year? Was it 1, 2? One would, I mean, there has to be some assumptions made with that one, right? But meeting earnings, wage gains, self-sufficiency wage, tied to those that are participating through the various programs that are able to hit the published self-sufficiency wage, which some of us who sort of know that world, I'm not sure that that is necessarily by itself a great indicator, because I think self-sufficiency and poverty level wages are, particularly in a place like Portland Metro, or maybe just the entire, West Coast, where wages and cost of living and all the things that are currently in play make it really a bit of a misnomer on some levels, because things are so costly. Then it gets into skill and credential gains here, which Craig, you've probably seen before. I think one of the things down here on career advancement, sort of to retention as well, but is wage gains with the same employer, gains with the same employer in key industries. I don't think we track that. I think we can, but it's called out here based on the work of that group that Julia's been leading, and then occupation advancement. So I'll stop there, but Craig, I think there are a lot of things that are in play, both with this work, the creation and then meeting of the metrics task force and this KIC assessment that can really help better address what you brought up. Okay. Aaliyah, can you bring the document?
Tara's had her hand up for a while.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see it. Thank you.
Thanks, Ashley. My question might be coming, you might want to parking lot it. Just, I didn't see it in the task 2 on your deliverables. Just wanting to check and see, I know part of the legislation and one thing that we haven't necessarily worked into previous assessments is review of the local workforce boards. So you might be getting to that, but I didn't see it in the task 2 deliverables. So I just wanted to check and see if this assessment was going to encompass reviews, not just like from the local workforce board's perspective and the convening of partners, and loosely adjacent to Craig's question.
Yeah, thanks for that. I thought of 2 things. One, an answer to your question, and then 2, a second thing that maybe we should call out. I talked to Jim Farr about it, but we'll see. So if you go, Aaliyah, back up to the very top of this document, it's required in the legislation, Tara, as you know, that the local boards be assessed. And you can see B under the second paragraph there, the local board, workforce boards are called out. So I think that, I think we're good. I do think that we need to make sure that that happens this time, and that we just raise that up as committee members, as well as staff, that the local workforce development boards are a part of the assessment. So they will be individually assessed, as will all those other entities. So I think we're good there. If you have certain language that you'd like us to include, or a different or additional way of doing that, it would be better additional, because that comes right out of the legislation. Just please let me know. And the other thing I thought of, Tara, when you started to offer up that question, was I talked with Jim Farr, who many of you know is Director of Ops over at the Employment Department, who Tara works closely with there, and asked him about an assessment that's currently going on at the Employment Department that was required by the governor's office. And one of the things I asked Jim was, is there an opportunity, because kind of to Craig's point too, we don't want to duplicate conflict with, not let it inform this body of work, that is the OED assessment, to make sure that we get a good final product. So I wonder, Tara and others, if it makes sense to have a sentence in here that says, under the sort of information gathering area, that, or maybe it's one of the documents that the contractor reviews, is the OED assessment that they're doing. I don't know, Tara, does that make sense? What do you think?
We could put it in there. I think my question is just stemming from also, as we're doing reviews and kind of the focus groups of staff on the ground, acknowledging their work, but not making them feel like, we're evaluating their performance per se. I mean, they can only deliver services as well as we organize and support partnerships and provide resources. And so, I guess my question is just looking at from the system, and the local workforce boards are just a huge cog in that wheel of conveners and pulling together local resources and community partners throughout the 9 regions. And so just I don't know if I know what that exactly sounds like in deliverables. I just wasn't seeing anything in the deliverables that was kind of leaning towards evaluating kind of that part of the system. And so, like I said, maybe as we get into like future conversations around scope of work, something will come up. I just wanted to ask the question and see what had already been thought of and where that was going to be taken into account.
Yeah, I think we can underscore that and bring that up in the kickoff meeting to make sure that, right off the bat, we highlight that, and then continue to, remind the contractor of these A through G, and sort of shepherd that through the actual project. Aaliyah, we've got about 6 minutes left. Could you flip down to the bottom so we can cover those off while we still have a little bit of time here? Thank you. Oops, right. Back up. Wasn't it? Right there. So then bullet 3, you can see the SWOT called out. Then draft report, outline, draft report, and then go final on that. I think maybe these are a little bit out of order, but invite and include numerous current participants and businesses to the virtual and in-person feedback session. This is kind of out of chronological order as you think through it. Then 2 virtual or in-person interactive work sessions with the KIC that I touched on earlier. Then next to last, implement insights and reporting summarizing regional innovation and practices ready for statewide scaling. And then last, the implementation framework refined through the KIC workforce sessions. On to task 3 is, the final report there. And it sort of talks about in that last sentence there, system improvement plan that includes, but is not limited to, an executive summary, key themes and implications. I'm not sure why that keeps blanking out. Sorry, guys, I'm not touching anything on my end. Identification of current successes in the work source system and potential scalability and replication. That's possible statewide. And then IDing current challenges in the workforce system. So that's clearly part of that final document. And I think, is that it, Aaliyah? A little bit more, there we go. And this just continues to sort of call out what that all looks like in terms of the report. And then obviously final draft with that plan and the report. The KIC will approve the systems improvement toolkit that's called out in the statement of work, implementation roadmap, the accountability matrix, and performance dashboard framework. And last, it will also include recommendations for next phase KIC priorities, including all those listed around piloting, feedback loops, capacity for change, accountability metrics, and formal accountability policies, which we sort of touched on several times. And last, how do we track all that? So that's sort of it in its current draft form. Again, we got about 3 minutes left. If you have any, at this point in time, if you have any additional questions or comments or recommendations to be included, please let us know. Thank you all for being here today. Really appreciate the engagement and your attendance. I think in terms of timeline, it's been challenging to get everybody together given busy schedules. We do, as I said, have this out to agency mid-leadership for feedback. I've gotten one person's back. I anticipate getting a few more of those back in the next few days, which we'll incorporate into this. I'm thinking Ashley, Kaylin, and Chris, that once we get that information back, we can circulate it out with the KIC to see if they have any additional feedback or comments. And then we should be, at the latest, Ashley, I think we should be, and Chris and Kaylin, ready to go with being able to finalize this and get it out on the street by, I'm thinking February. I was going to say January, but I think that's being overly optimistic. And Craig Pope, you can appreciate this given our work on the Forestry Committee, Forestry Workforce Committee. But I think we're getting closer to where we can begin to, consult with our procurement office and get things moving forward there. So any last comments, questions from anyone?
I guess what's the timeline from there, Todd? If it's finalized and it's launched, we would hope to hire by spring break, or what's the timeline?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good estimate, Kaylin. It's tricky because things pop up that we don't expect sometimes. It also depends on how busy the procurement staff are. I mean, there's a number of things that play into that, but I think at a high level, probably beginning Q2 of 26 is probably a pretty good estimate of timeline. I think that we'll have, of course, we have, I think, a January KIC meeting planned. Hopefully, we'll be able to utilize that to help sort of move things forward, which may include bringing some of the procurement staff or the procurement manager to that meeting, just to make sure we're all on the same page and have crossed T's and dotted I's. But yeah, I think that timeline is a pretty realistic one. It looked like Craig, you had your hand up.
I did. Because I guess I missed the announcement for what's our budget here. What's being allowed?
Yeah, the budget is up to 150. So there's another thing that could. I was thinking of you, Craig, earlier when you asked that question during the forestry report of, is that even enough anymore? Right? It's sort of there because that that is what it's been for quite some time. And I think to your comments in the forestry workforce study, Craig, what about inflation? You know, if we continue at that level, does that mean we're not getting as many quality responses as we otherwise would if we shifted that budget upwards? We've got it set at that, and a large part of that is to help with moving it through procurement, because as you know, Craig, if it goes at over 150, it triggers Department of Justice review, DOJ review, which can be quite lengthy and cumbersome in certain ways. So something to think about. I have it written down on my notes because I was channeling you, Craig, to check in with Derek Disney when I talk with him and remind him of the challenges that we had. And then also, you know, from time to time, procurement laws change and we don't know about it. So I'm also going to ask him if by chance that, you know, they raised the cap with DOJ. So yeah, great question. And I've got it on my radar to talk with Derek about.
All right. Any other comments, thoughts? We are running over time. Kaylin and I just want to say thank you, everybody, for being here today. This is the big scope of work, but hopefully you see the exciting changes in the scope of work that we see in it, and we look forward to continuing to work on it together. If you have other thoughts, comments, now that you've heard Todd talk you through it, please send those along to Todd, Ashley, Kaylin, and myself. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, everybody.